Fifth Hour Radio Show.
Let's just start at the beginning, man. What made you get into wrestling in the first place, you know, as opposed to maybe getting into other sports?
Well, I mean, I did get into all the other sports. It was actually by fluke I even got involved in wrestling in the first place.
Okay.
Like I was playing baseball, basketball, things of that nature, and it was a fluke in my seventh grade year that I was not a very good basketball player. I basically rode the pine more than anything. It did not have that ability of dribbling the ball and looking away and still actually having the ball underneath my hand. So I sit on the old bench there. Just happened to be a big flu epidemic hit. A lot of students were sick. A couple of my friends that were on the wrestling team said, "Hey, Dan, would you come and fill in a spot? Otherwise, we have to forfeit it." And I thought, well, here, I'm a big old strapping farm boy. Why not? I'll go out there and show them a thing or two about wrestling. And tried out, got beat both times, and I finished up my illustrious seventh grade basketball career. The next year, I signed up for wrestling instead of basketball.
So you kind of took to wrestling like a fish in water, right?
Oh, no, I sucked.
Oh, really? All right.
I do a lot of motivational speaking to, junior high school athletic programs, stuff like this, because they all think that I had to be a success. Just like what you were assuming. No, I sucked. And I lost a number of additional matches before I finally won my first match. So usually my speech is kind of like, it's a great feeling when you win, you know. It's like you exonerate. I didn't know if I felt good because I won or if I actually found someone who was worse what I was. So that's how I kind of...
So at what point in your career did you actually, start getting better?
Sophomore year in high school.
So
I read my very first amateur wrestling magazine that talked about all kinds of aspects of the sport of wrestling. Talked about setting of goals, nutrition, weight cutting, weightlifting programs, cardiovascular programs. It just it really opened my eyes that there's a whole lot more to a sport than what your coach tells you. Mm-hmm. That's why I set my first goal to become the first freshman ever to make our varsity high school team. And but still, my season, I still had a losing season. I achieved my goal, but I still had a losing season. And that's a lot of funny stories about what happened there, because the only person I could beat on the team was the heavyweight. He was a big, soft kid. And the ironic part was I only weighed 155 pounds wrestling at heavyweight. Mm-hmm. Heavyweight at this time period was unlimited. You could wrestle anything as long as you weighed a minimum of 175 pounds. Well, I didn't even weigh the minimum, but it was a whole different era. So I would go to the weigh-ins with my coat, all my clothes on and stuff like this, because they didn't have it. They did not do the skin checks and stuff like this, but like they do today. So I would go to weigh-ins, fully dressed, shoes on, my coat on, and just cans of pop in my pocket. I got up to the minimum weight of 175 pounds.
So you got a full ride to Arizona State?
On wrestling, yes.
Yeah. You were like a two-time All-American, right?
Yeah, three-time.
Three-time, my fault. Was there any no-holds-barred competitions going on at that time that interest you to make you get into that kind of thing? No,
that did not even exist. I went to school from 76 to 81, and then from 81 to 86, I was the assistant wrestling coach there. Then I left Arizona State to take a job at Michigan State University as assistant wrestling coach for another couple of years. So none of that existed at that time period. Not until officially December 1993 was the very first event that ever took place. I always tell people that 1994 is when, no holds barred broke at the most listeners and or readers, they don't even know what no holds barred terminology means anymore. Mm-hmm.
So, what sparked your interest in no holds barred competition? I mean, were you ever hesitant to enter?
Oh yeah, it was right in the very beginning. I didn't know if when a buddy of mine showed, he he watched the very first two UFCs, and he copied them onto an old VHS tape and showed them to me, and I was really kind of blown away because I saw people getting soccer kicked in the face, stomped, this, that, and the whole 9 yards. I'm like, wow, these are not exactly skills that I possess. But then he said, well, hey, look at this skinny little guy doing jiu-jitsu. Of course, he was referring to Hoist Gracie. And so I had never been exposed to jiu-jitsu, so I said, well, it kind of looks like wrestling to me. I figured if a guy's close enough to throw down upon me, I either step back and stay out of range or close the distance before they get any real velocity on things. And that's actually the theory that I started with, and actually the same theory that has carried me all the way through my career.
As far as the UFC is concerned, was there like an application type process to enter? And, how do they choose the competitors?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There were several martial arts magazines, such as Black Belt was one of them, and there were some other karate magazines where the current ownership took out full-page ads and simply said something like, God, I have to go back and find one, but it said something like, do you want to be a cage fighter or do you want to be a no-holds-barred fighter? Something like that. Then you simply fill out the application and you sent it on in. Well, I sent it on in, but nobody called me back. I was told during that time period, that 94 period of time, that they were receiving a couple hundred applications on a daily basis. I was already a professional wrestler as of the 92 Olympics, and I went out to a professional wrestling show that took place out in Los Angeles. So a couple phone calls were made to Art Davey, one of the owners of the UFC at that time, and Art came out and watched me in my professional wrestling match and then conducted his own private interview afterwards with me. So...
Well, at that time when you entered, how proficient were you, in the submission type holds?
I trained when I was told that I was in my very first event coming up, UFC number 4. I've always kept a rather busy lifestyle. I trained time-wise. I only had 5 days to prepare for my very first no-holds-barred event. So I trained for 5 days, an hour and a half a day. That's it. Okay. That's all my workout partners had in them. We trained inside of a professional wrestling ring because cages were not abundant like they are today.
Exactly.
So I was inside of a professional wrestling ring, and between my 3 workout partners, they had one pair of old boxing gloves between them, and the name of the game was Punch and or Kick at Dan. I was staying out of range or closing the distance, getting standing clinches, takedowns, or throws, and simply slapping on amateur wrestling techniques, which all create leverage. Leverage equals pain, and made them scream or squawk, which is my amateur wrestling technique. And that was my training camp. I did not train a single strike. I did not train a single submission. When I walked into my very first UFC, when they asked me what my discipline was, I simply said, I'm a wrestler. And that's all I was.
Now, in the beginning of the UFC, there were absolutely no rules, except maybe eye gouging.
There were 2.
There were 2 rules. And there was no weight classes either, right?
Right. The two rules were: do not bite your opponent, do not stick your fingers in their eye sockets, no eye gouging. Those were the only 2 rules. Only 2 rules.
And
if you were some of the matches where people are like, well, you could not. Yes, it was done. There was one match, Keith Hackney versus Joe San.
Yeah, Joe San. I've seen that. Joe San had to be in some terrible pain.
He took about, 5 or 6 straight shots to the old gonads there, yes.
How did he take them shots? I mean, did you wear any kind of supporters or anything like that?
Well, they do recommend that you wear a mouthpiece and a cup. But I don't think too many cups have ever been tested quite like that.
I seen in your interview where you called your style, I don't know how old the interview was, but a little bit of Heinz 57.
There were no training manuals. There were no DVDs, no VHS tapes, nothing. Used to be, I mean, it wasn't called mixed martial arts. It's called no holds barred. It was style versus style. You had Taekwondo guys versus boxers, kickboxers versus jiu-jitsu guys, Muay Thai guys versus wrestlers. I mean, it just, you were categorized as either being a striker, and that striker could have been a boxer, kickboxer, Muay Thai, karate, kung fu, or you were a grappler. Judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo, just a wrestler. But that's how the sport started to evolve, because the match, when us grapplers walked into the cage, we realized the matches are starting on their feet. So I need survival skills, enough to know how to strike or enough to know how to defend strikes, so I can get to my standing clinches, my takedowns, or jamming them up against the cage wall. And all the strikers realize I'm okay while I'm on my feet, and I have some space to work my magic. But if I need survival skills if I should be clinched, taken down, or jammed up against the cage wall. Probably the greatest match that started to show that transition would have been Mark Coleman versus kickboxer, black fighter by the name of Maurice Smith.
Yeah. Now is that the fight that Coleman took the shot?
Yeah, took a kick to the face. You bet. But I mean, Maurice Smith solicited Frank Shamrock's services. He goes, I got Mark Coleman coming up here in a amount of time, and Frank is showing Maurice all these cool submissions and counters and this and that, and to be a watch out for. And with each passing day, Maurice is realizing this is too much information for me to learn in this short period of time. And I tip my hat to Maurice, because Maurice comes up with, show me how to tie him up, get to a stalemate. And because if they get to a stalemate, what happens? They stand the fighters up. Who does that benefit? It benefits the stand-up striker now.
Yeah. Man.
So, I mean, Maurice had to weather a hell of a storm that night, because Coleman must have took him down 5, 6, 7 times and tried to ground and pound before Maurice could actually get a hold of his arms and stop him.
Yeah, that was one of the most wicked kicks I've ever seen.
Yes. Well, I mean, Coleman was so exhausted, bent over, his hands on his knees. You can almost read what's going through his mind. It's kind of like, I could care less, Maurice, if you even kick me upside the head right now. I'm too tired to try to take you down again. And Maurice obliged him.
Yeah, he sure did. Man, let's skip forward a little bit to your pro wrestling career. Did you approach them, or they approach you as far as wanting to join the organization?
Well, I mean, I wanted to jump into professional wrestling. I was approached by other companies just because of what I had done in other areas. I jumped in professional wrestling. I used my real name. I used my real amateur wrestling credentials. I happened to be on one show, and that big guy out of I think it was out of Nashville, Tennessee at the time, and he said, "Is that stuff legit?" And I said it was. He says, "Well, you got to be over in Japan doing this thing called shoot fighting or shoot wrestling." I had never heard of it before. I gave him a business card and an athletic resume. 3 days later, I get a phone call. 10 days later, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee for a tryout. 30 days later, I'm in Tokyo, Japan, in front of 12,000 people. Don't have a clue as to what I'm supposed to do. All I know is my Asian opponent kicked me half a dozen times really, really hard. As I always put it, my cheese slipped off his cracker. I grabbed a hold of my Asian counterpart there and threw him all over the place, dismantling him much to the crowd's delight. And that was my inauguration into the world of shoot fighting and or shoot wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Well, how big of a transition was it going from Ultimate Fighting to the actual pro wrestling?
Well, you got to realize I did. Well, I mean, the hardest part was going from amateur wrestling to being a professional wrestler. That was my hardest transition. It still is my hardest transition, still to this day. Although I have retired from MMA competition as of January this year. This is my final year of professional wrestling. I will be retired from professional wrestling as of January 2014.
Okay.
But the hard part, as I said, was from transition from amateur wrestler to professional wrestler, because as an amateur wrestler, I simply always looked upon the other person as an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So to be aware of the crowd, what they're biting on, what's getting them excited, stuff like this, that was very difficult for me to do, to listen to the crowd, them screaming and hollering and this and that, because it's, professional, you're an entertainment product.
Yeah.
And so you have to fill a window of time. The promoter might say, I need you guys to go out there and do a 10-minute match, a 20-minute match, whatever the time slot is, and this guy wins, and this is how I want you to win, and then pretty much the rest of the match you guys make up yourself. So, and that's why I tell people that I have been hurt far worse in my professional wrestling career than I have been in all of my cage matches combined. Wow. Which is a contradiction in terms, because how is that possible when one is fantasy and one is reality?
That is kind of, it seems backwards there.
Well, but the rationale is this: in a real fight, all I've got to do is walk out there and get results. In professional wrestling, you have to put your body into another person's hands. And then you got to play the guy that he knows what to do with your body, because if he screws up, it's not him who gets hurt, you get hurt.
We got some listener questions for you, Dan, if that's all right.
Yes.
One of them is, of all the fights you've had, and from the list of the very few that you didn't win, which fight do you wish you could do over?
Well, in my final couple of years, I was trying to do my own self-directed retirement tour. There's only 3 people I would like to have had one more match with, and right in the order, it would have been Mark Coleman, Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie. If I could have those be my last 3 matches, that would have been my last 3 matches of my career.
Okay. Of all the fights you've had, who was the hardest puncher?
I tell you that. I know that there's been a couple matches where I simply got hit so hard. I'm seeing like 3 people out there, and I'm trying to keep my faculties together, and I'm thinking, go for the guy in the middle.
Okay, I got you.
I am using some humor there, but there's some times I got hit so hard it just felt like a big going right, and then literally I feel like it is going in slow motion, and I'm like trying to keep myself afloat and keep moving and keep myself trying to close that distance to get to those clinches so I can shake the cobwebs back out of my head.
Okay, now this question might have tied into what you said just a few minutes ago, but is there someone you never faced that you wish you could have?
Ironically, I believe that answer would be no. And it's just because how I ever got involved in MMA nose barred industry in the first place. It's kind of a long drawn out story, and it's not worth going into right now. But it just, you got to realize I've never been in a fight in my entire life. All those matches to me, a lot of people call them fighting and go, no, it's not a fight. There's rules. Mm-hmm. There was a referee. I'm probably never more than 35, 40 feet from a medical practitioner. It's what you do out in the streets. It's what you do at a bar when alcohol makes you too crazy.
10 foot tall and bulletproof, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I call just sheer stupidity at that point in time, and I've witnessed sheer stupidity on many occasions.
So you never had to mix it up on the street? Never. That's great, man. That's great.
I do a lot of speaking engagements. Again, I talk about, I speak about bullying. I also speak about gangs and things of that nature. And to me, it's like, you don't know what I have in my pockets. I don't know what you have in your pockets. I don't care how big and bad you are. How strong do you have to be to pull a trigger?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How strong do you have to be to stick someone with a knife? Not very strong. That's why I've always been a big advocate of the golden rule of life. Treat everybody else the same way you want to be treated, no better, no worse.
Okay, so you got training facilities. Is there just one, or is there a few across the United States?
Realistically, I have one in Coldwater, Michigan. The next thing that I'm working on here is in Arizona, Tempe, Arizona. I have an with Arizona State University, where I will be starting up a submission grappling class in the fall, probably in the month of September, utilizing the same facilities that the Arizona State wrestling team utilizes and the Sunkist Wrestling Club. They're an international, domestic and international club that promotes our folk style, freestyle, and Greco-Roman styles of wrestling. So
you train seasoned vets as well as amateur guys off the street.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I do. I enjoy more working with the amateurs than the pros, because a lot of the pros seem to think that they know it all, or they're like a little bit like a band of gypsies. They tend to stay with you for a short period of time, then they think the grass is greener somewhere else, and they go somewhere else, but then they come right back to you again, realizing what you were teaching and what you're doing for them was pretty darn good, better than what they thought they would have gotten someplace else.
You know, I've seen a program you do, and I don't know if it's just for law enforcement, and I'm thinking that's what it is, but now everybody get this because I love the title. It's called Basic Pummeling. Is that like a short course for people?
Well, no, I mean, the pummeling is stuff that's not really just a short course. I mean, basic pummeling is what I show. I mean, I teach that to law enforcement, but I also teach mixed martial arts, because the reality, there is a new criminal that law enforcement has to face, whether it's in corrections, whether it's in just walking the street now. I mean, if you go to any you go to any bar on a Friday or Saturday night, and you see a guy wearing a tap-out T-shirt and an affliction ball cap, and he's had one too many beers into him, I guarantee you he's telling you that he's training for the upcoming cage fight or something like that. Is he? No. It's kind of like what you said before about, thinking that you're bulletproof in the whole 9 yards. But the basic pummeling I teach is when you watch almost all the MMA fighters nowadays, they are utilizing more and more of this upper body clinching, jamming them up against a cage wall. A lot of them don't even realize that they are learning the most basic fundamentals of Greco-Roman wrestling, a.k.a. pummeling.
Not to change the subject or anything, but you actually dabbled in acting a little bit. Did you not? Yes,
and actually I've done a few low-budget flicks, a couple other, I think, a little bit more notable type of films, and I even have, I think, a couple more coming up later this
Well, you were in Swamp Zombies.
Yeah, there was a classic on Swamp Zombies. Yeah, I think it's in like 3 different zombie movies alone.
Hey, zombie movies are hot right now. There's no doubt about that. Now,
don't get me wrong. I mean, vampire movies, zombie movies. It's I don't get it, but it's I kind of down to about that. A great one that would be what was called Win by Fall. I really enjoyed being a part of that one. Probably one of the very first movies I ever got involved with, but it's only as an extra, was be called Rudy, based upon Notre Dame football.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I mean that turned out to be a very classic.
One of the best sports movies of all time, I think.
Oh yeah.
One of the best endings too.
Yeah. Well, again, it just but that was a true ending. That he was one of the, or he might have been the last football player that was carried off of the field.
Yeah. I mean, that movie, Rudy, and Rocky, probably my 2 favorite sports movies.
Well, you're speaking to the choir there. Out of all the Rocky movies, only the first one is the one I like the most. And and I thought, again, those are the kind of movies I like. I like inspirational type of movies like that.
You think there should be any more Rockies? You think they should do just one more?
No, I think The Rock has gone one too many. I mean, he can go out there and be Mick, his coach now.
Yeah, he could do that role. Yeah.
Wear the stocking cap and start talking out the side of his mouth or something like that.
Yeah, he's got a few Rambos left in him, though. I think he can pull that off.
Oh yeah, no, I can give it to him. I mean, you can put him with those, like the movies like The Expendables and things of that nature. He's still going to go with those cast of high testosterone type of characters. You bet.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, but can you tell our listeners where they could go as far as social media, websites to get more information about you?
Yeah, I've got all the Twitter, the Facebook, things of that nature. Probably the quickest and easiest is to just go to dansevern.com. Now, it looks like a three-ring circus just for the sheer fact that I have been around forever. I won my first national title in 1972. So when I say I've been terrorizing athletes for decades, I mean I've been terrorizing athletes for decades.
You sure have, man. Hey, Dan, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, man. We really appreciate speaking with you.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, you have a good one.
You too. Bye.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.